Greetings to iGod listeners and welcome to this reflection on the readings of the 19th Sunday in the Ordinary Time. I am Wojciech Szypula, Divine Word Missionary. The three readings of today's Liturgy of the Word present three key biblical figures in unique situations of great fragility, vulnerability, and crisis, and thus we see Elijah, Paul, and Peter wrestling with their inner conflicts that could potentially put an end to their respective missions. Each of these stories merits an extensive reflection on its own, but for today I propose we focus on the first of these three great figures, namely Elijah. To understand today's reading, we have to place it in its context. And the story of Elijah unfolds in the context of the kingdom of Israel in the 9th century before Christ. There and then, the Israelite king Ahab and his wife Jezebel decided that they and their subjects, the whole kingdom, should renounce the God of Israel and embrace a Canaanite god of nature, whose name was Baal. This was to be the state god for the kingdom that they were building. Thus, the kingdom of Israel effectively became an apostate kingdom who has abandoned the God who brought them out of the land of Egypt and established them in the land. Now, Elijah's life and his mission, his life project, was to sustain the faith in the one true God and restore the apostate kingdom, the apostate people to their roots. And he failed. In chapter 18 of 1 Kings, which precedes today's reading, we read how Elijah demonstrated that the God of Israel is the one true God by bringing down fire on the prophets of a false god Baal. But instead of convincing the rulers of Israel about the truth, he brought death sentence upon himself. King Ahab and his wife Jezebel did not turn back to God of Israel, but turn against God's prophet and pass the death sentence upon him. And then Elijah fled to save his life and hid himself in a cave on Mount Sinai, where we find him in today's reading. And there, in a cave, in a state of bewilderment and confusion, he made a bitter complaint to God in words that unfortunately were omitted from today's reading, but are essential, as he says the following words: I have been most zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, but the Israelites have forsaken your covenant, they have destroyed your altars and killed your prophets by the sword. I alone remain, and they seek to take my life. Thus the prophet saw himself as a total failure and wanted basically to abandon his mission. And it is at that moment, in response to his desperate cry, that God manifested himself to Elijah. And what is crucial in today's reading is the manner of God's appearance. There was this mighty wind and the rock-shattering earthquake and the consuming fire, but God was not present in any of these overpowering natural phenomena. Instead, the Lord's presence was manifested to the distraught prophet as, and I quote, a sound of sheer silence. And here lies the core of the message. The false gods, especially Baal, who was the god of storm and rain, were thought to be powerful beings who manifested their presence through these spectacular and terrifying natural phenomena such as thunderbolts, whirlwinds, fires, rock-shattering earthquakes, and so on. But God's voice and God's presence come to the prophet as a soft whisper from the midst of a gentle breeze. And we see here a tremendous contrast between nature's violent and overwhelming power associated with pagan gods and the soft whispering, gentle sound of the true God's presence. My dear listeners, what then is the lesson for us in this story of Elijah? Well, our lives are often overpowered by storms, earthquakes, whirlwinds, fires of crisis that permeate and threaten our daily lives. They come from the outside, from our troubled world, from our divided society, from our competitive environment where the fittest survive, and they come from our chaotic minds and divided hearts, which often feel like that tornado raging within us. Let us learn from Elijah. Let us stand in the front of a cave, our caves, where we seek shelter from the power of these life-shattering whirlwinds and listen for silence. And it is in that stillness that we find the whispering silence that tells us that in the heart of our life's whirlwinds, God is present with us. How did the story of Elijah end? Well, I'm not going to tell you. Read the rest of his story in 1 Kings chapter 19. But as we end this reflection, let us walk away with the question that God asked Elijah, perhaps substituting the name Elijah for our own name, Mary, John, Bob, Wojciech, Elizabeth. What are you doing here? Stop hiding from the whirlwind. Go and seek the sound of sheer silence in the midst of those earthquakes, and that is where you will encounter God. May you have a silence-filled day and hear the sound of sheer silence, which is the reassuring whisper of the one true God.